So now that we understand geometric mean and as well as arithmetic mean, we can actually start to update our matching function to use this new knowledge. So the first thing I want to do is import at the very top. I'm going to do from decimal, import decimal. So this is a Python, built-in Python function that converts all of our numbers into decimals, or when we want them to. So now I'm going to actually get rid of a lot of this old code that we no longer need. I'm going to leave user object there. Okay, and I'll keep Khaleesi and jmitchell3 because we might need to copy those back in. Okay, so we've got our users and we've got these functions. This old getMatch function I'm going to get rid of because we no longer need it. We've created this getPoints function and it works pretty well. So now in here I'm going to add a percentage in here. So the percentage will be at the very end, and I'll just say it's pretty easy. We'll do percent equals to points possible. So a total awarded divided by a points possible. And we want the decimal value of one of these numbers so it doesn't round it. And this will give us a percent match based here. So that's good. So that's based off of that particular question because we only have one question, as we see here. So now we're going to actually have to iterate through all of the questions that are related. But first I'm going to go ahead and print out the percent so we can see what that looks like. So I'm going to copy all this and go into the Python shell and print it out. And now we've got these percentages coming through, 0 and 1. Right, so James Bond is giving 100% because it's giving all of the points awarded to Khaleesi, and Khaleesi is giving 0 of all of 200 to James Bond. So it's not great yet because they've only answered one question, so their match is not really that high. But we also want to go through all of their questions. So that's really what we want to do. So here, instead of having our get points go off of just one of the iterations of it, we want to go off of all of the iterations. So now our loop, or this part right here, is going to have to be tabbed in because we're going to go for, then we want to say A, not caps, but for A in A answers. We're going to loop through there, and then we'll say for B in B answers. And then we'll loop through there. Tab this in. So notice we have A answers here, so it should be A question ID, and then B answers. So everywhere it says A answers, we want to change it to being just A. And then everywhere it says B answers, we want to change it to being B. And I think that's it. So now we're actually going to loop through everything. So let's try it out. We might have an error here somewhere, but query set object has no their points, so we might have B answers. And that's this right here. Should be A. All right, let's try that again. So now we've gone through here, and James Bond awarded 250 points to Khaleesi, but Khaleesi awarded 0 to James Bond all the way down, and points of 500. So these are not very good matches themselves, but that's okay. So now that we've got these points, we might want to return a few things here. So get points, we're going to return, let's return the percentage as well as the number of questions. So number of questions that actually exist. So we'll say number of questions equal to 0. And then each question that is related, we'll say plus equals to 1. So we'll return back the percent and the number of questions. So now, do it again. And we can set these to variables. So we'll say A equals to this, and then B equals to this. So A and B. Might need to copy this whole thing in. More than likely we do. So A, B. Let's try that again. We have an indentation error here. A and B. Cool, so we've got 2 questions total, so that's good. So that means that we can do a times b to the 1 divided by 2, which is coming off of the number of questions, and we have this coming through, or we would do a0 times b0, and then it would also be b1. That works. And it's giving me invalid operation. You can't do 0 to the 0 power, right? That doesn't make any sense. You can't do 0 to the 0 power. So they don't actually have any matches whatsoever. So I'm going to pause it for a second and add some more like results that are favorable so they are closer alike so we can actually see a match happen. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so I changed some of the results a little bit, and now we see that Khaleesi has awarded 300 points of 500 to James Bond, and James Bond has awarded 100%. So now what we can do is actually calculate this again. I'm going to first calculate it manually. So let's take a look at the numbers, and it was 0.6 and 1, so 0.6 times 1, and it's going to be to the, well, there's likely going to be 2 questions that are left, because it should be just 2, because there's only 2 in the database, but let's actually print out the number of questions. So we're going to run that function one more time. Yeah, 2 questions. So it's going to be 1, 2.0. So this is the percentage that it will actually be. So this is their actual match percentage. So if I paste it, there we go. We've got 70 some odd percent. So since that's the case, let's go ahead and write this out using the actual numbers from the code itself versus handwriting it. So first off, I'll do decimal of A times decimal of B. And of course, it's the first position of B and A. So A's 0 and B 0. And then we'll multiply that by 1 divided by the decimal of either one. So it's going to be B1. So B1, of course, being the question, or A1. And it's definitely going to be that. Okay. So let's copy this. Paste this in. And we get that same number. So it's decimal of that. So we say match percentage equals to that. So match percentage. There we go. And we can use some substitution here to make this a little bit better. Put the whole thing in there. Just formatting substitution. So percent dot 2 dot f. There we go. And lastly, we will just print the match percentage. Oh, and then we can also copy this whole thing, paste it in, and there we go. We got 77. Perfect. So that is actually showing us the match percentage, so now that's all working. This is getting very, very close to actually finalizing this percentage. There is still one thing that we might want to be concerned about, is whether or not, if either one of these numbers was 0, the match percentage is going to change quite a bit, because 0 times anything is always, always, always going to be 0. So we might want to actually adjust that. So if it is 0, we'll just put it to being 0.01, and that's just how we'll change it. So let's do that now. So we'll say if we'll return, instead of this, we'll say if percent is equal to 0, percent equals to 0.00001. Just so we can still have some sort of percentage coming through no matter what. So it's not multiplying by 0. It's still going to be a very, very low number, but it's not going to, this result might end up being 0, but it's not going to be perfectly 0. So we can test this again. So let's bring this function into our shell. And let's see if any of these have a 0. So, yep, 0. There we go. We've got 0 from 1. So now, Let's set A and B being J Mitchell 3 and Khaleesi instead of those. Okay. So now we'll print it out. And the percentage comes out to being 0, as it should, because realistically that's what it'll end up being. They gave 0 to each other, right? So there's no matches whatsoever. So they gave 0 to each other, so it's definitely going to be a 0%. But since we added this right here, it allows us to still work with these numbers without giving us some huge errors. And this right here, we just rounded it. So if we didn't round it, if we just did this right here, it gives us, it's not coming in correctly, but it's giving us to the e to the -7. So it's a really, really small number. So it just rounds to 0. All right, so if you have any questions on this, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.